The morning sun barely touched the tarmac at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport as Rebecca Torres adjusted her perfectly pressed uniform in the crew lounge mirror. After 12 years as a senior flight attendant with Horizon Airways, she perfected every detail of her appearance. Not a hair out of place, not a wrinkle in sight. Image was everything in this business, or at least that's what her supervisor, Catherine Walsh, drilled into them daily. Rebecca had worked her way up from economy to first class, and she wore that achievement like armor. She'd seen thousands of passengers come and go, and she prided herself on reading people the moment they stepped toward the gate. Designer luggage meant priority treatment. Discount store bags meant coach passengers who needed managing. It was a system that worked, and Rebecca enforced it without question. Today's flight to Seattle was fully booked, including 8 first-class seats that were already checked in. Rebecca reviewed the passenger manifest on her tablet, noting several business executives and one last-minute booking under the name Thomas Wright. The gate area buzzed with the usual pre-boarding chaos as Rebecca positioned herself near the jetway entrance, ready to welcome the premium passengers with her trained smile. That's when she noticed him shuffling through the terminal. A man in his late 50s wearing faded jeans, a wrinkled flannel shirt that had seen better days, and scuffed work boots that looked like they'd walked through a construction site. His gray hair was slightly unkempt, and he carried a simple canvas backpack slung over one shoulder. He moved slowly, almost deliberately, toward the gate area, occasionally glancing at the departure screens overhead. Rebecca felt her jaw tighten slightly. Another budget traveler trying to sneak into the priority boarding line, no doubt. She'd dealt with this type before, people who thought the rules didn't apply to them, who'd argue about baggage fees or try to sweet-talk their way into better seats. She watched him approach, already preparing her polite but firm refusal. The man in the flannel shirt approached the gate desk just as Rebecca announced pre-boarding for passengers needing extra time and first-class travelers. He reached into his back pocket and produced a boarding pass, extending it toward her with a slight nod. Rebecca glanced at it, then did a double-take. The pass indicated seat 2A, first class. "Excuse me, sir," Rebecca said, her voice dropping to a tone she reserved for situations like this. "I think there might be some confusion with your boarding pass. Are you sure you're in the right gate area?" The man looked at her with calm, steady eyes. "Gate 17, Seattle departure. That's what my pass says." "Yes, but—" Rebecca hesitated, choosing her words carefully. She'd been trained never to discriminate, but she'd also been trained to maintain standards. "Sir, this boarding pass shows a first-class seat. Sometimes the system makes errors, especially with last-minute bookings. Let me just verify with the gate agent." She caught the eye of Marcus, the gate agent, who was helping an elderly woman with her carry-on. Rebecca gestured him over with a subtle wave. The man in flannel stood patiently, his expression unreadable. Around them, other first-class passengers had begun to line up, a woman in a sharp business suit, a man in an expensive overcoat, a younger executive typing furiously on his phone. Marcus checked his computer, frowning slightly. "The pass is valid, Rebecca. Thomas Wright, seat 2A, first class." Rebecca felt a flush creep up her neck. Something wasn't right. When was this booked? "Last week," Marcus replied, already turning back to assist other passengers. Rebecca lowered her voice and leaned closer to the man. "Sir, I apologize, but our first-class cabin maintains certain standards. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in our Economy Plus section. I'd be happy to arrange a complimentary upgrade to a seat with extra legroom." The man's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or recognition of something he'd clearly experienced before. "My ticket says first class. I'd like to board now, please." Other passengers were beginning to notice the holdup. Rebecca felt trapped between her training and her instincts. She made a split-second decision. "I'm going to need to verify this with my supervisor before boarding. Please step aside." Thomas Wright moved to the side without protest, but Rebecca could sense the tension radiating from the growing line of first-class passengers behind him. She pulled out her phone and quickly texted Catherine Walsh, her supervisor, who was overseeing operations from the airline's office upstairs. While she waited for a response, Rebecca watched Thomas from the corner of her eye. He didn't pull out his phone or seem agitated. He simply stood there, hands in his pockets, occasionally glancing at the airplane visible through the terminal windows. Something about his calm demeanor unsettled her more than if he'd been angry or argumentative. Catherine's response came through within minutes. "What's the issue? Flight departs in 20 minutes. Rebecca typed back quickly. "Passenger dress code concern, first class. Doesn't meet presentation standards." The reply was immediate. "Use your judgment. We can't have complaints from other premium passengers. Offer alternative seating." Armed with supervisor approval, Rebecca approached Thomas again. The other first-class passengers had already boarded, shooting curious glances at the man still waiting by the gate desk. A few economy passengers had started snapping photos with their phones, something Rebecca had learned to hate about modern air travel. Everything became a viral moment these days. "Mr. Wright," she said, keeping her voice professionally neutral, "I've consulted with my supervisor. We're prepared to offer you a seat in Economy Plus with our compliments, along with a travel voucher for your next flight. This is a one-time courtesy due to the unusual circumstances of your booking." Thomas finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "What unusual circumstances? I purchased a first-class ticket. I'm not dressed inappropriately. I'm not intoxicated. I'm not being disruptive. On what grounds are you refusing me service?" Rebecca felt several nearby passengers turn to listen. This was escalating in exactly the way she'd hoped to avoid. "Sir, Horizon Airways reserves the right to refuse service to maintain the comfort of all passengers. Our first-class cabin represents a premium experience, and what?" Thomas interrupted gently. "I don't look like I belong there." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Rebecca's training kicked in. Never admit fault, never create liability. "That's not what I said, sir. I'm simply offering you alternatives that might make your flight more enjoyable." Thomas pulled out his phone, and for a moment, Rebecca thought he might be recording her. Instead, he made a quiet phone call, speaking too softly for her to hear. Then he turned back to her. "I'll wait." 20 minutes past scheduled departure, Flight 419 to Seattle remained at the gate. Rebecca had never delayed a flight before, and the weight of that decision pressed down on her shoulders as she stood her ground. The economy passengers were growing restless, some demanding explanations, others recording the standoff on their phones. Marcus had made 3 separate announcements about a minor boarding delay, but patience was wearing thin. Catherine Walsh finally appeared in person, striding down the jetway in her immaculate navy suit and heels that clicked with authority. She was 50-something, sharp-featured, and had a reputation for backing her crew without question. Rebecca felt a surge of relief as her supervisor approached. "What's happening here?" Catherine demanded, sizing up Thomas with a single sweep of her eyes. Rebecca explained the situation in hushed tones, emphasizing the dress code concerns and the need to maintain first-class standards. Catherine listened, nodding occasionally, then turned to address Thomas directly. "Mr. Wright, I'm Catherine Walsh, Operations Supervisor for Horizon Airways. I understand there's been some confusion about your seating assignment. While we appreciate your business, our premium cabin does maintain certain expectations regarding passenger presentation. We're prepared to offer you a full refund of the difference between economy and first class plus." "I don't want a refund," Thomas said simply. "I want to sit in the seat I paid for." Catherine's professional smile tightened. "Sir, you're now delaying an entire aircraft full of passengers. If you continue to refuse our reasonable alternatives, I'll have no choice but to deny you boarding entirely and remove you from this flight." That's when a voice called out from the jetway, "Hey, isn't that Thomas Wright?" A younger man in casual business attire had stepped off the plane, apparently recognizing Thomas from where he sat in first class. He approached with a confused expression. "Mr. Wright, it's me, David Chen. We met at the aviation summit last month. Are you not boarding?" Thomas gave him a small nod of acknowledgement. Apparently not David. David looked between Thomas, Rebecca, and Catherine with growing comprehension. "Wait, do you people not know who this is?" Catherine stiffened. "That's not relevant to—" "This is Thomas Wright," David interrupted, his voice rising with incredulity. "He owns Wright Ventures. They just bought Horizon Airways last week. It was all over the trade publications." The terminal seemed to freeze. Rebecca felt her stomach drop as Catherine's face went pale. Catherine Walsh's composure cracked like ice under sudden pressure. There must be some mistake. The acquisition hasn't been finalized yet and—" "It was finalized on Wednesday," David said, pulling out his phone and quickly navigating to an industry news site. He held up the screen, showing a press release with Thomas Wright's photo, the same man standing before them, though in the professional headshot he wore a suit and tie. The headline read, "Wright Ventures completes acquisition of Horizon Airways in $800 million deal." Rebecca couldn't breathe. $800 million. She just tried to refuse boarding to the man who now owned the entire airline, the man who, technically, employed her. Thomas finally spoke, his calm demeanor never wavering. "The acquisition team wanted me to tour the facilities, meet with executives, review operations from the corporate offices. But I've learned over the years that you don't really understand a company from boardrooms and spreadsheets. You understand it from the ground level, from how it treats people when no one important is watching." Catherine fumbled for words. "Mr. Wright, we had no idea. Your team never informed us you'd be traveling today, and certainly not that you'd be. That is, we would have made special arrangements." "Special arrangements," Thomas repeated softly. "You mean you would have treated me differently if you'd known who I was? That's exactly the problem, isn't it?" Rebecca wanted to sink through the floor. Around them, phones were raised, recording every moment. This would be everywhere by evening: social media, news outlets, aviation forums. Her 12 years of perfect service destroyed in one catastrophic decision. Thomas continued, addressing both Rebecca and Catherine now. "I flew commercial for 30 years before I made my first million. I remember being treated like I didn't matter, like my business wasn't valuable because I didn't dress the part. When I started Wright Ventures, I promised myself that any company I invested in would value people, not appearances." He gestured around the terminal. "These passengers have been waiting for almost 40 minutes now, because you judged me by my clothes instead of my ticket." Marcus, the gate agent, had gone completely silent, standing frozen at his computer terminal. Other Horizon Airways employees who'd gathered to watch the commotion began backing away, recognizing the magnitude of what had just unfolded. "I'm boarding this flight now," Thomas said, his voice still calm but carrying unmistakable authority. "We're going to Seattle, and when we land, Catherine, I'll expect you and Rebecca to meet me at the corporate office downtown." Rebecca moved through the boarding process in a daze, mechanically checking tickets, while her mind raced through potential consequences. Thomas Wright walked past her onto the plane without another word, settling into seat 2A with the same quiet composure he'd maintained throughout the confrontation. David, the young executive who'd recognized him, sat nearby and immediately struck up conversation, though Rebecca couldn't hear what they were discussing. Catherine had disappeared back into the terminal office, probably already on the phone with corporate headquarters. Rebecca knew the news would spread through the company like wildfire. By the time they landed in Seattle, everyone at Horizon Airways would know what had happened at Gate 17. The flight itself was torture. Rebecca performed her duties with robotic precision, serving drinks and meals in first class while avoiding any eye contact with Thomas. He treated her with polite indifference, accepting his beverage and meal without comment, then spending most of the flight reviewing documents on a tablet. Once she caught him looking thoughtfully out the window, and she wondered what he was thinking, whether he was planning to fire her immediately upon landing, or if her punishment would be something more drawn out and humiliating. Other crew members had heard whispered fragments of what happened at the gate. Emma, a younger flight attendant, approached Rebecca in the galley with wide eyes. "Is it true? Did you really try to keep the new owner off the plane?" "Not now, Emma," Rebecca said tightly. "But they're saying he's going to clean house, that heads are going to roll in management. Catherine's already been texting the entire flight. I saw her phone when I was doing the safety check." Rebecca closed her eyes. 12 years. 12 years of early mornings, difficult passengers, perfect performance reviews. All of it potentially ending because she'd made assumptions about a man in work boots and flannel. As they began their descent into Seattle, Rebecca forced herself to make the standard announcement about preparing for landing. Her voice sounded hollow in her own ears. Through the window, the city emerged from the clouds, Elliott Bay glittering in the afternoon sun, the Space Needle pointing skyward like an accusation. When they touched down and taxied to the gate, Thomas was one of the first passengers to deplane. He nodded politely to Rebecca as he passed, and she managed a strained, "Thank you for flying with us," that felt like swallowing glass. Catherine was waiting at the gate, looking haggard. She'd clearly spent the flight in crisis management mode. "Conference room, downtown office, 4 o'clock, she told Rebecca quietly. "We're meeting with Mr. Wright and the executive team. Bring your employee file." The Horizon Airways corporate headquarters occupied 15 floors of a gleaming downtown Seattle tower. Rebecca had only been here once before, for a company-wide celebration when they'd won a customer service award 3 years ago. Now, riding the elevator to the 14th floor with Catherine beside her, she felt like she was ascending to her own execution. The conference room was smaller than she'd expected, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound. Thomas Wright sat at the head of the table, still in his flannel shirt, flanked by 2 executives in sharp business attire. A gray-haired man introduced as Richard Hayes, the new CFO, and a woman named Jennifer Martinez, VP of Operations. Catherine took a seat across from them, gesturing for Rebecca to sit beside her. Thomas opened a folder containing what appeared to be printed screenshots, images from the gate confrontation that had already spread across social media. "These photos have been viewed over 2 million times in the past 6 hours, he said without preamble. "We're trending on 3 different platforms and not in a good way. The headlines are calling us classist, elitist, and discriminatory." Rebecca felt her face burn with shame. "However," Thomas continued, looking directly at her, "I didn't ask you here to fire you, Rebecca. I asked you here because I want to understand how this happened." The question caught her off guard. She'd expected accusations, termination, maybe even legal action. Instead, Thomas seemed genuinely curious. Rebecca struggled to find words. "I thought I was maintaining standards. That's what I was trained to do, ensure that first-class passengers have a premium experience, that the cabin reflects the quality they're paying for." "And you determined that my appearance would somehow diminish their experience?" Thomas asked. "Yes," Rebecca admitted, then quickly added, "but I was wrong. I made assumptions based on superficial factors, and I let those assumptions override basic respect and policy." Catherine interjected, "Mr. Wright, Rebecca is one of our most experienced flight attendants. This incident is completely out of character for her performance record." Thomas held up a hand. "I've reviewed her file. 12 years of excellent service, multiple commendations, 0 complaints. Which is precisely why this situation is so troubling. If someone with her experience and record can make this mistake, It suggests a systemic issue rather than an individual failure. Jennifer Martinez leaned forward. "We've been conducting interviews with staff since you acquired the company, Mr. Wright. There's a culture here that prioritizes image over substance, that measures success by superficial metrics." Rebecca was following informal guidelines that have been reinforced through years of performance evaluations and supervisor feedback. Thomas nodded slowly. "Catherine, how many times have you instructed your crew to maintain standards in the premium cabin?" Catherine shifted uncomfortably. "It's part of ensuring customer satisfaction. By excluding customers who don't look wealthy enough." The silence that followed was damning. Thomas Wright stood and walked to the window, looking out over the Seattle skyline. When he spoke again, his voice carried both disappointment and determination. "My father was a mechanic for 35 years, worked with his hands every day, came home covered in grease and exhaustion. He flew commercial exactly once in his life to my college graduation, and the way he was treated in the airport broke something in him. He felt like he didn't belong, like his hard-earned ticket wasn't good enough because his hands were calloused and his clothes weren't fancy." He turned back to face them. "I built Wright Ventures specifically to invest in companies that needed cultural transformation, places where good people were trapped in bad systems. Horizon Airways is profitable, well-managed operationally, and has excellent safety records. But this," he gestured to the screenshots, "this is exactly why I bought this airline." Rebecca found her voice. "What happens now?" "Now we change," Thomas said simply. "Catherine, you're going on a 90-day performance plan. You'll work directly with Jennifer to develop new training protocols that emphasize respect and inclusion over appearance-based judgments. If you complete it successfully, you keep your position. If not, we part ways." Catherine nodded stiffly, clearly relieved it wasn't immediate termination. Thomas turned to Rebecca. "And you're going to help implement these changes. You'll be temporarily reassigned from flight duties to work with our training department. You'll share your experience, honestly and completely, with every crew member in this company. You'll help us understand how these informal standards developed and how to dismantle them." Rebecca felt tears threatening. "You're not firing me. I'm giving you the chance to be part of the solution instead of just being punished for the problem," Thomas replied. "But make no mistake, this is your one opportunity. The next time you judge someone by their appearance rather than treating them with basic human dignity, we're done." "I understand," Rebecca said and meant it. Over the following weeks, Rebecca found herself standing before room after room of flight attendants, gate agents, and customer service representatives, telling the story of her mistake at Gate 17. It was humbling, sometimes painful, but also transformative. She watched understanding dawn in her colleagues' faces as they recognized their own biases reflected in her experience. Thomas Wright became a regular presence on flights, sometimes in business attire, sometimes in casual clothes, always observing how passengers were treated regardless of their appearance. Horizon Airways rolled out new training programs emphasizing dignity and respect. The viral photos that had threatened to destroy Rebecca's career became teaching tools instead, examples of what the company was moving away from. 6 months after that fateful morning in Dallas, Rebecca returned to flight duty with a new perspective. She still took pride in her appearance and professionalism, but now she measured success differently, by how she made every passenger feel welcomed and valued, not by how well they fit her preconceptions. And whenever she saw someone in work boots and flannel boarding a flight, she made it a point to greet them with extra warmth, remembering the day she learned that dignity has nothing to do with designer labels, and everything to do with recognizing the humanity in every person who crosses your path.